Breaking news that we have right now from Reuters, and President Donald Trump has imposed 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum, signing that proclamation on all steel imports and aluminum as well. That, again, according to Reuters. Let's bring back the front bench: Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers. We also have Stephanie Levitz and Joël Denis Bellavance here. Okay, so this is what it is, guys. We have it now. And I guess, Dan, the question is, now what? I guess Canada and this government does have to speak at this point, don't they?
Well, I think we need to show responsive strength in the same way we did retaliatory tariffs were imposed in 2018. These were done globally. As we talked about in the last segment on the panel, I think the more we can target American states that have a political impact on Trump, the stronger we'll be. I saw reporting today, may have been in the Globe and Mail, so I'll give Steph and her paper the credit for this. Some reporting on Kentucky's bourbon industry and the governor of Kentucky's response to how punishing and difficult tariffs on his state's biggest exports were in 2018, how much an impact they had on the political conversation in that state and a key constituency for Republicans. And I think that's the kind of thing we need to see global response brought to bear on very quickly. I think Shakir's right. Like, if these are going to have an impact on American consumers and many, many other industries, we're going to see that bear out. And I think the political will of the Trump administration to keep these in place will probably be as long-lasting as it was in 2018. And I think they'll look for a negotiated exit where Trump can kind of bang his chest and look like he's achieved something, kind of like he did with Canada and the border and the fentanyl czar a few weeks ago.
Shakira, how do you make sure that you get that message to Americans, though? Because it will take some time for them to feel the pinch, to feel the effect of these types of tariffs, and to see things become more expensive. How do you target those red states, and how do you make sure that ordinary Americans understand, no, this is what he's done, not what he is saying he has done? Because I think that that is part of the issue here, is it not? Trying to counter the message out of Trump's mouth and to really sort of help people understand, no, this is what's happening to you instead.
Yeah, I mean, I think elected leaders can say whatever they want. I think people will see it when it hits their pocketbook. So, as I said earlier, if what we're saying is true and the cost is going to increase in the U.S., then it will have an impact. And I think those voters in those red states will have to go to their governors or to their state representatives and have them kind of lean on Donald Trump and say, this is causing great pain. To Stephanie's point earlier, these folks do want to get reelected, right? They care about self-preservation. And so we'll have to deliver that message to the president that, enough is enough. Let's find a way out of this. To what Dan said earlier as well, I do think at some point, if there is a lot of economic pain or people are feeling that pinch, Donald Trump will look for an off-ramp. I don't know what that off-ramp looks like, but he will look for an exit at some point. So continue to deliver the message to U.S. representatives like our premiers are doing right now. Continue to talk to governors down there. And again, if pocketbooks start to get a little tight, I feel a strong message will be delivered to the president from the GOP representatives.
Timing's everything, Steph. So tomorrow we know that a lot of the premiers will be down in the United States. How key now are these conversations that they're going to have with U.S. lawmakers now that this is happening?
Pretty pivotal. I mean, seize the moment, as it were, carpe diem. They're down there, so they can talk to their counterparts at the state level and say, let's reflect. We have some premiers who were around in 2018 will remember what happened then. And can talk about it and sort of perhaps, be interesting to see, as much as we talk about a Team Canada approach up north, to what extent can these premiers build alliances that they can count on? One of the things we've all reflected on in the last, say, 10 days or so is it's a very drip, drip, slow sense that we have allies in America, that there are people willing to speak out. To Shakir's point about the Kentucky governor, or Dan, that we need those folks to be speaking up as well. And of course, I don't think Donald Trump's going to like it if some governor starts speaking up for Canada, but certainly speaking out against the policy and why this could be bad for America. The challenge becomes Donald Trump doesn't seem to believe in free trade. Isn't that part of the thing that we're sort of skirting around here? This idea that he's upending this consensus that has been built over time between Canada and the U.S. and Mexico, that free trade is to the benefit of our economies. He seems to believe that that was not the case. And there's a lot of arguments about how free trade, North American Free Trade Agreement, led to the political populist movement, effectively, that ended up electing Donald Trump. There's a long through line there. If he doesn't believe in free trade, it doesn't matter how many governors can make the case, because he might make the argument hurts you today, but in 20 years, you're going to have new factories in your state, and you're going to thank me, U.S. President Donald Trump. You can put my mug right next to the other guys on Mount Rushmore.
And isn't that the problem, Joel Denis? Because he is seemingly so dug in on this and so convinced that he's doing the right thing that, you know, contrary to what both Shakir and Dan are saying, he may not want to take that off-ramp. Even if he sees the stock market tomorrow start to tank, start to crash, he may go, no, to Steph's point, everybody just wait. I got this. In 10, 15 years, we're going to be set up.
And he said, you know, he warned the American people that there might be some pain for a while, but for long-term gain, and that's in the light of his strategy. But fundamentally, I don't think Mr. Trump believes in free trade, and I think the free trade agreement that we've known and relied upon for the last 40 years, I think, is pretty much on its last legs, if I may say. Now, you talk about the premiers going to Washington tomorrow. The tariffs announced today also hit the European Union, other countries. So Canada should build alliances with those countries also to apply pressure on the United States. So we're not alone in that basket of being hit by Mr. Trump, Mexico and Canada, the European Union. And yesterday, the French President, François Macron, spoke very harshly of what's to come with the United States. What are they chasing? Are they chasing us, or are they chasing China? If that's the case, we shouldn't be hit. So I sense that Mr. Macron will lead a strong riposte, if I may say in French, against what Mr. Trump is proposing. And so we should look towards the European Union to build alliances, and but there's a coincidence. Mr. Trudeau is actually in Paris right now, and I'm sure he's talking to Mr. Macron about this.
Just to counter that, though, Dan, do you think that will matter to Donald Trump? If, again, to the point that we were making here in studio, that he believes this is for the good of his country, if not today, then 20 years from now?
Well, I certainly believe he feels that way. I certainly agree that he's not a supporter of free trade and never has been. I mean, there are clips from the 90s of him on television talk shows talking about his opposition to NAFTA and its initial iterations. And this is a long-held belief that he's not going to move off of. But the reality is that this, even if he wants his legacy to be that in 20 years American manufacturing jobs come back, he's not going to be around to see it. And I don't think he's got more than 2 years of political will in the White House before he starts to become a lame duck president. And does he really want, in that time, in his 4 years in office, and those where he's actually a powerful president, does he really want American pain, American suffering around economic woes, around rising inflation, around loss of jobs and industry, in order to impose this ideological view he has around trade? I'm not as convinced. I think he's looking globally to strengthen his hand so that he can look like he's achieved some big wins when he renegotiates some deals with other countries. This is about a slogan, make America strong again. That's what he ran on. He wants to make America look like it's strong, and I think that's the outcome that he really cares about.
So, Shakir, to that end, what does it do to have a global consensus, as Joel Denis was saying? You know, does Macron take the lead here and try and go and speak with him? Can anybody get through to him in this case?
I'm not so sure Trump is compared about what cares what the global community has to say. Domestic politics might be a different issue, but like you asked me in the first question, what messages can be delivered to Trump? I think one thing with Trump, like Dan was saying, he has this 2 years before, you know, he kind of becomes a lame duck, but he has such control over the Republican Party in the United States. I actually think most politicians are scared to even approach him. He said some pretty wild things over the last 2 weeks. And every time you hear these Republican senators get interviewed or congressmen get interviewed, they kind of, you know, appease Trump and say, well, he didn't mean this, or they kind of walk back a few things, but no one actually opposes him. And so I'm not convinced on this issue in particular, like steel and aluminum tariffs, anyone's going to come out and like have our back or have the global community's back. I think he has such an iron fist and control over the Republican Party right now that we're going to have to wait and see how this plays out. And unless it's just so drastically bad for the American consumer, no one's going to even say a word to Trump. They're just going to let this roll out for the next 2, 3, 4 years and just see where the chips fall.
Yeah, and that is the biggest danger that we have. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. But I think we're all sort of looking at this and wondering whether or not anybody does have his ear, or anybody does feel like they have that courage that they can go to him and say, look, this is painful in my state, and we need to do something about it. Of course, we're not going to stop talking about this, because this will continue in the days to come. I want to thank Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, Stephanie Levitz, and Joël Denis Bellavance for being on the front bench.